my dear children. I am here to discuss and continue our lesson on The Lumber Room by Saki. I hope by now you can remember up to which point we discussed the lesson previous day, and we could discuss how Nicholas was found guilty by others for being disgraceful behavior at his breakfast table. He had put a live frog into his wholesome bread and milk to prove his aunt that what adults tell always not correct, and he proved his aunt was wrong, and for that he was in disgrace, and aunt had arranged a punishment for him. That punishment was not physical. Can you remember? Aunt suddenly arranged a trip to take all the other children to Gedara sand to punish Nicholas mentally, and today I am going to discuss from there onwards. What do you think? What happened to Nicholas? How did you feel? Okay, let's see. Continuation of the story, Lumber Room by Saki. Nicholas was in disgrace for his disobedience. Up to that point I discussed right now. And what happened to him really? Then, was that punishment a real punishment for him? Who was actually punished? Those are the things I am going to discuss today. Do you think the same person who went inside the lumber room came out? What happened to him inside the lumber room? How did he feel inside the lumber room? We are going to discuss all these things in detail, and I think you have an idea about who this Nicholas is. He seems to be a very mischievous child, and he is very intelligent enough and very tactfully handles situations, right? We will see what he is going to do. And first of all, we will see how did Nicholas feel when all the others were about to set off their trip or their expedition to Gedara sand. How she did howl, said Nicholas cheerfully. Can you remember that incident? Just about to set off the trip, his cousin sister hurt her leg and she started screaming. And then Nicholas felt a bit of happiness within him, a slight jealousy because he was not able to join in the company, and when the girl was screaming, he felt that the trip is not going to be successful. Right at the beginning of the trip, somebody was unhappy. Then he felt a little bit happy about that. Not that he was happy that the girl cousin was crying, but it indicated that the trip is something that is not going to be very enjoyable because she is already in pain. Then again he made another strong comment looking at Bobby's shoes. Bobby won't either enjoy himself much and he won't raise much either because his shoes were too tight for him and he was also walking with difficulty. Now this boy Nicholas, of course, is very thrilled to note all these things, and because of that he was having this grim chuckle when he was telling all these things, a kind of laughter, kind of a smile on his face, right? So he told you twice, but you weren't listening. You often don't listen when we tell you important things, was another strong comment made by Nicholas to his aunt after hearing her response. So it shows that aunt's quality and what type of a person aunt is. Let's see the reaction of aunt for all these things. Can you remember how she was responding? Right? So his displeasure for depriving him of the joy of the expedition was there in the mind of Nicholas. It is evident because even a toughest boy can feel it because he was also a little boy and he did all these mischievous things with a purpose. He wanted to prove that adults are not always correct in what they say, and their behavior is something that makes children unhappy. So, because of this trip arranged without him as a punishment had made him little bit miserable, and his displeasure was there in his mind. But again, he could be happy in another way, because he understood that these two children have some problems, and because of these problems, they are not going to be happy, and the trip is not going to be an enjoyable one. So, as a child, his obvious thrill about how his cousins will miss the chance of enjoyment, it is an indirect expression of his jealousy, of course. His aunt's authority and tyranny is there, because aunt had arranged this. And children, can you remember when this little girl hurt her leg? Could you hear any word of kindness? Could you hear that aunt was soothing her or trying to say something to comfort her? No. All these things were not there. So, why is that? So, it shows aunt's insensitivity, and she is not in a position to cuddle these children or help these children in their troubles or in their misery. But what she wanted most is to dispatch these children somehow or other to have this expedition as a kind of punishment to this boy, Nicholas, right? So, his aunt's authority and tyranny is there. Her insensibleness to children's emotions, actually she was blind to see or to note all these things. That doesn't mean that she can't see anything, but her emotions were not so flexible, right? Her only intention was to get rid of these children, dispatching them to show that she cares for these children, and actually not to get rid of, to send them, right? So, to show that she is caring for these children, but not for Nicholas, because he was in disgrace. At the same time, can you remember in my first session I told you that it was a period where the law of the adults was the rule, and they were not inquiring or they were not thinking of the ideas or the emotions of the children. So, just before she arranged this trip, did she ask any child whether they like to go there? Was she thoughtful enough to see whether it's the correct time to send these children there? Nothing was there, but she just arranged a trip on her own will to punish Nicholas. Remember that very well, right? So, actually, how this punishment is going to work out for them. Nicholas and these children, whether they are going to enjoy the trip, those things are very much important. Then strong comments that his aunt made tell us about her character, because when Nicholas was bringing out certain ideas, aunt also giving some counter arguments. Now, look at the first one. Remember these lines, and then you can quote all these lines in your answers. She will soon get over that. That means her pain. It will be a glorious afternoon for racing about over those beautiful sands. Now, she is creating a very beautiful picture. So, as readers, we get some visual imagery. Children are racing on the sand, and they are enjoying their thrills of voices, and everything can be visualized. And aunt was creating this picture in the mind of the readers as well as in Nicholas's mind. So, how will he feel? Will he be happy to hear all these things, or whether he is going to accept it or going to react for that in a different way? How they will enjoy themselves is another comment she made. To hurt Nicholas purposely, she was telling all these things. Why didn't he tell me they were hurting, was the response when Nicholas complained that Bobby is having a pain because the shoes were too tight. Then, with all her comments, we can get a clear picture, or we can have an idea about this aunt, whether she is going to be a very kind and loving aunt for the children, or a kind of dominant, authoritarian, insensitive one. So I just want you to suggest some other words other than the words I use to describe the character of aunt. So she is dominant, she is authoritarian, she is insensitive, she is unkind. Other than what are the words we can use? Let's see. She is wicked. Do you think she is wicked? Yes, she is unkind and she is wicked. Can you remember how she rudely elaborates on how Nicholas's cousins will enjoy their racing on the sand to make him feel sad and to hurt him emotionally? It was a kind of mental punishment for Nicholas. I think you can remember the other point I discussed in my previous lesson. These punishments were not corporal or physical, right? So aunt and adults of that period or that era just wanted to punish children emotionally. They hurt their feelings, they hurt their emotions. So this is one example, right? So she is insensitive. That is why she was not asking anything. A word of kindness was not expressed when that girl was screaming. She was stupid in her ideas. What she wanted was to dispatch or send these children off to this jagabara of sand, nothing else. She seems to be a not caring and loving aunt. That is why she is not listening to the children when they tell important things to her. At the same time, she seems to be very unthoughtful person, right? Usually we hear that mother is the most thoughtful person in the house because she is concerned about all the matters of the members of the family, father, the children and everybody. So she prepares everything and she is concerned when somebody is sick and she is trying her level best to help them out. So nothing was there in aunt's reactions or aunt's behavior. That shows that she is not a thoughtful person. She is not a very concerned, caring caretaker, of course, because these children were under her domination, under her control, because all these children had their parents in some other countries, right, doing their duties. So aunt had to look after. So as their caretaker, aunt was not very thoughtful. Remember that very well, right? So this aunt is wicked, insensitive, stupid, not caring and loving, and she is unthoughtful, right? These types of ideas that developed in mind to understand that aunt is wicked, aunt is insensitive, aunt is stupid. So all these ideas might have influenced Nicholas to be bold and determined to become smart and hostile, of course, because she was hurting him, and for that she wanted to counter-react, or she wanted to give another reaction. So for that he was showing some kind of behavior that was against the will of his aunt. What was this will? Right? Let's see. After sending these children to Jagabara of sand, at the same time we get the idea that she is an opportunist. She changes the topic immediately after she found guilty and embarrassed for not listening to them. So when Nicholas complained that when we tell important things, you are not listening, that is a very strong comment to show that her uncaring behavior. So she felt embarrassed and she suddenly changed the topic, and she told that Nicholas is not to enter to the gooseberry garden. So then he wanted to say that, no, why can't I go there? So again we see that she is an opportunist. In the event when she fell into the rainwater tank, she wanted Nicholas's help and she was calling Nicholas to come into the gooseberry garden. As she demanded him not to, Nicholas refused. Nicholas said that, no, I can't come because my aunt told not to enter there. So then she says, yes, I told you, but now I want you to come there. So we understand that she is an opportunist. At the same time, these words, we can't rely on her words, right? So once she tells something, at another time she changes her word. So how can children trust her? She is not going to be a reliable, trustworthy adult then. Yes. Then why does aunt want to keep him away from the garden? There is a particular reason. Now she prohibited him entering into this gooseberry garden. Auntie knows that he is smart, and at any moment that he will violate the rule or break the rule that she gave and enter into the gooseberry garden. So Aunt was suspicious, and she wanted to have a kind of guard or kind of a self-imposed sentry duty to stop Nicholas entering into the garden. She becomes suspicious of Nicholas, that he will violate a rule since he has proven him to be mischievous and smart. It is introduced as a place with two entrances and is presented as a place of greater attraction with the thick growth of artichoke, raspberry canes, fruit bushes. So when you hear all these things, we understand that the garden seems to be a very attractive place for anyone. And it has two entrances. One point again, anybody can enter from one of them, right? So Aunt knows all these things, and she's very much concerned not letting Nicholas enter into that. So she was taking all the efforts to keep him stop entering into the garden, right? Artichoke, raspberry canes and fruit bushes seem to be very attractive. I think you can remember the picture I showed you, the house with a beautiful garden, right? To show that it's a beautiful garden, I wanted to have those pictures and some other new ideas of artichoke bushes. You can see that they are very beautiful and flowering in purple color like, and then it gets a beautiful fruit again, and the picture below that artichoke bushes is the fruit of it, and then other thing mentioned is raspberry canes and a type of kind of berry, and it is very attractive and tempting. Anybody will like to eat it entering into the garden. So because of all this beauty and all these fruit trees they are in the garden, it was a forbidden paradise. Remember the word forbidden paradise. Nobody was allowed to enter. That is why it is a forbidden place. At the same time, word paradise, again important to show its beauty, to show its richness, right? So anybody will get attracted to that because of that beauty that lies there, right? So let's see what comes next. Gooseberry garden is introduced as the forbidden paradise. Aunt keeps a watchful eye, not letting Nicholas entering this. I told you that she was having a self-imposed sentry duty, just like a soldier or a policeman guarding a place in his sentry point. Aunt was also there doing some odd jobs of gardening and waiting there for 2-3 hours to check whether Nicholas is going to violate her rule or to enter to the garden without any permission, because he was not given permission, right? He was asked not to enter into the gooseberry garden. Do you think that Nicholas really wanted to enter to the garden? Though Auntie was having that idea, Nicholas will enter into the gooseberry garden, there was something else in his mind. He wanted to do something else, but Auntie's suspicion that he will enter into the gooseberry garden was an added advantage for him, because as long as Aunt has that idea, Nicholas can have his adventure. His adventure was something else. He wanted to get entered into the lumber room. As long as Aunt thinks that he is going to come into this, she never suspects that Nicholas will enter into that particular place, which was also again sealed from the youthful eyes. Children were not allowed to enter into that place as well. Now can you think of this aunt? She is not letting children enjoy their childhood and to have a kind of enjoyment getting into a beautiful garden, or else entering into another place and having a kind of enjoyment, right? So very strict rule and very pleasant place to live or unpleasant place. If you had all these restrictions, unpleasant feelings, will you be there happily doing your work, or will your childhood be very pleasant one? I think right at the beginning of this story I told you that Saki Ochish Munro was having this real experience with his aunts and grandma in his childhood. This Nicholas's character can be considered as a voice of his childhood, right? So this is a kind of, not fully, but a kind of autobiographic story, right, to show that how strict was that setup in the family and how they were deprived of their childhood enjoyment, how blind, how unemotional these aunts to give a little chance for these small children to enjoy their childhood and this pleasant experience, right. So let's read what's there on the screen. Nicholas had no intention of trying to get into the gooseberry garden, really wanted to impress aunt that he entered into it and can have his adventure getting into the lumber room. That's what I was telling you. As long as aunt thinks something else, he can have his adventure, which was open for aunts and such like privileged people. To enter into the gooseberry garden, the key was also something important. At the same time, the permission was there only for aunts and privileged people. Children were not privileged. They were not allowed. So, key is also important to get to that place. And what did Nicholas do? When aunt is very much sure that he is not going to enter into the gooseberry garden, but that suspicion is still in her mind, Nicholas got the chance. Having thoroughly confirmed and fortified her suspicion was that Nicholas is going to enter into the gooseberry garden. Yes. Then Nicholas tactfully handles the situation. Not only this, he handles many other situations in the story very tactfully. He's going to be very witty and very shrewd at times, very smart, right. So, here the key was somewhere there on the book rack, one of the shelves. So, he reached there and after taking the key, what did he do, right. So, let us see, getting the flat, important looking key. So, remember these words, flat, important looking key. Actually, this key was important. One thing is, it was the key to have his treasure or the wealth where he could be very happy. At the same time, that key is very important for aunt at another level, because she wants to keep it away from the children so as they won't get entered into this particular room. So, actually, what is this lumber room? Is it so pleasurable? We will see, right. So, at the same time, he says, mysteries of the lumber room secure from unauthorized intrusion. Again, these words are very important. We will read that line again. Getting the flat, important looking key which kept the mysteries of the lumber room secure from unauthorized intrusion. Unauthorized means not allowed, intrusion means somebody entering by force, right, without permission. So, the key was the thing that kept this unauthorized intrusion secured from these children, right. Having this plan in his mind, he had practiced with the schoolroom door. What is this? So, in their house where Nicholas was, you see now children are not allowed to lock a door or unlock a door even, right. So, those things are something very trivial, but actually is some kind of pleasure activities for children, because they feel, oh, I also can open the door, right. I also can go out. But these feelings were not there for these children. They have not got the experience of locking and unlocking a door. So, what he had done was, he had the idea in his mind, one day I must enter into this lumber room. For that, he should practice with the key how to open the door. So, he had practiced that at schoolroom door. So, he seems to be a master planner, because having this in his mind, he had done it long before, right, practicing how to open a room door with a key. Then my picture I showed you in my first discussion So, you can see a beautiful garden, and at the same time, in contrast to that, something gloomy like black in color. Some odd things can be seen in the picture, right. So, the boy is going to enter now. He seems to open the door, right. So, let us see why these two pictures are like this. You can very clearly see it is a contrast from that beautiful garden which aunt had not allowed him to enter. He enters into another place that does not look very interesting, very much attractive, very much good looking, right. So, it has black color like, right, we will see. Why lumber room was so special? That is my question. A region that was carefully sealed from the youthful eyes. Children were never allowed to enter to that place, right. So, then it was carefully sealed from the youthful eyes. Children had not got any opportunity to see what is in it, right. So, carefully sealed from the youthful eyes, remember those words. And then, concerning which no questions were answered. Whenever children raised a question about this lumber room, maybe they were asking what type of things were there in it, right. So, no answer came out of the mouth of his aunt or any other aunts. So, that is why they say concerning which no question were answered. That was the idea given by the writer, right. So, why is he giving such a comment or such an importance to this lumber room? There should be something, right. So, for Nicholas, it was an unknown land. He had never been to that place earlier. Gooseberry garden was a stale delight, mere a material pleasure and storehouse of unimagined treasure. So, these words are very important. So, first of all, when he entered into this lumber room, such a beautiful gooseberry garden, I think you can remember the beautiful pictures that you show, raspberry canes and then artichoke bushes, everything, and the other fruit trees had made this garden a very beautiful place. But soon after entering into this lumber room, Nicholas felt that it is not a very beautiful place, right. It was a stale delight. It did not give him any more or pleasure at all, right. So, it is just a material pleasure, but what he saw in the lumber room might be very much important and might have given him a very good experience to be happy, right. So, that is why he says it was a storehouse of unimagined treasure. Until he entered into that particular place, he had never thought that that place is so beautiful and is piled up with such important things, right. For a small child's mind, there might have been some important or very attractive things to win his heart, right. Evidence for this artistic mind of or taste of Nicholas, right. So, when we hear these words, unimagined treasure and this beautiful gooseberry garden is felt a stale delight, shows that Nicholas has a very good artistic mind or very good taste, and at the same time his intelligence to compare things. He is a matured person, like he is matured to his age actually. He was thinking, oh my God, now these things here in this lumber room are so beautiful, so much important than the things that we use in our house, right. So, these words are there just after you read the other lines, right. So, it shows his intelligence and his imagination. We will see his power of imagination, how far it is expressed by the writer, right, and his self-confidence. Do you think Nicholas is self-confidence? Why? So, he could reach the place where the key was hidden, and then after that, with the practice he had in his school room door, he opened the lumber room door and entered it. All these things show that he is a very confident person. So, he shows some qualities of a matured person, though he is a small child. Of course, he has that self-confidence. The very first incident of putting a lively frog into that, his wholesome bread and milk, and then claiming that there is a frog in it, is also a bold step, right. So, again he has shown that he is a very bold and self-confident person. What type of a place is a lumber room? What are you going to put in a lumber room? Actually, how many of you have a lumber room in your houses, right? So, it may be a separate place from your house or one part of the same house where we are going to hoard up or collect or keep certain things that are of course old, just because we have used it for a certain period of time and feel that we can't throw it. At the same time, we feel that sometimes it may be useful. Having all these ideas, so thinking like that, certain items we use at home, we are not going to throw, but we are going to collect them in a place. Such a place is known as a lumber room, right? So, a place to dump used items which look unimportant because they have worn out because of the use of it, right? And exhausted items and worn out items. They are no more attractive and interesting, but we feel ought to throw them also. And a way of preserving for future use if necessary. That is the most important idea we have to take. We are putting things into a lumber room having the idea to preserve or protect them for future use, right. So, such place was a lumber room. So, think of it, when you are entering into a place where there are some worn out or used materials and that was full of dust and damp or wet, do you feel interesting and do you like to enter such a place? Actually, in real sense of it, we do not. Even I do not like, because it is smelly and unpleasant, right, and not tidied up, not things were put in a proper order, everything was hoarding up, right. So, thrown into sometimes, right. So, things spoiled by use and consign them to dust and damp by way of preserving. Those are the ideas we get when we hear the word a lumber room, right. So, Nicholas has seen such places in his house, but then he feels that these places are rather bare and cheerless, right. So, such places where damp, dusty, old things are hoarded up are seen or felt as rather bare and cheerless. But this particular lumber room seemed to be a contrast. Nicholas sees lumber room as a wonderful place, right. But he found a lumber room to be a place with wonderful things for the eyes to feast on, to please his eyes. He could see number of items, a variety of things in it to enter into a different world. Unimagined storehouse of pleasure, right? Unimagined storehouse of pleasure. First thing is a tapestry. Actually, in that tapestry, it was a picture, a wall hanger with two spotted dogs, a hunter aiming at a stag, and basically one could see those things. But when Nicholas was observing that picture, he noticed that some wolves are coming out of the thick jungle. Then he felt whether the hunter will be able to save his dogs and his life from this threat. So, he went on thinking like that, and it shows his power of imagination, his rich imaginative power, looking at a wall hanger, looking at the picture, creating a story in his mind suddenly, because he had not read another story about that or anything, right. So, suddenly he went on thinking of this picture that he saw, and he created a story on his own. So, it is an evidence or a proof of his power of imagination, rich imaginative power, and his creativity to make such a beautiful story by looking at a picture, right. So, his artistic values or artistic mind. He is a person with rich imagination. Then after that, it was not difficult to creep up to feeding stag. So he understood that any hunter can easily creep through the jungle to a stag or another animal that was feeding, because the animal who is feeding is concerned about what it eats. But of course, animals are very sensitive. They are listening to the sounds and they just get a watchful eye. Of course, we have to say they are very watchful, and when they hear a small sound even, they are ready to stop it and turn away and run away from the scene, right? So anyway, now he also thinks, Nicholas thinks that it is not a difficult thing to get at a feeding stag. With the trained 2 spotted dogs, until that targeted animal is shot with arrows, these animals, the dogs, those who were trained also going on, helping the hunter, right? So at the same time, as I said earlier, 4 galloping wolves were coming in his direction. Whose direction now? The hunter's direction through the woods. But in the picture, hunter is not able to see those things. These ideas are coming into the mind of Nicholas. So again, this incident of tapestry took him to another world where he could create a beautiful story, right? So that is why he found this lumber room is a place where he can derive tremendous pleasure. He was very happy. He was extremely happy to look at all these things. Then, what were the other objects of delight and interesting claiming his instant attention? Delight and interesting items, right? Claiming his instant attention, because now he entered into this lumber room as an adventure. He knows that at any moment, sometimes auntie may get an idea that he has entered that, right? So he has a kind of like idea. At any moment, he will be caught up. So instant attention, right? Quaint, twisted candlestick in the shape of a snake. Now, can you imagine candlestick in the shape of a snake, right? Then teapot fashioned like a china duck. Sandalwood packed with aromatic cotton wool, in which he found brass figures. In that sandalwood pack again, the boy found some brass figures. A less promising in appearance, a large square book with a black cover, which contains pictures of birds. So these are some other interesting objects he found in the lumber room, right? So teapot. Looking at the teapot also, again he was thinking that something very uninteresting that aunt is using in the nursery, right? So what they used at home was not so beautiful, but he felt that what she has hoarded up in this lumber room seemed to be very beautiful, right? Again, that sandalwood pack with some brass items took his attention. And then this book is very important. Because the writer says the book doesn't look very good in appearance. It is not attractive at all, because it was a large book with a black cover. So the cover page was black. So it is something to do with like very uninteresting, gloomy, and easily a child's mind won't get attracted to that. But so the writer has told that it is less promising in appearance. Then after that, when Nicholas opened the book, what could he see? Right? He saw some beautiful pictures of different types of birds, and he had never seen them coming into the garden. So entered into a world, a bird's paradise like, right? So he entered into a place where he could see variety of birds, but all these things were pictures in that book. So never aunt had given them an opportunity to enjoy any of these items in the lumber room. If not, Nicholas got entered into this, he even wouldn't have enjoyed these things. So such a we'll say unthoughtful, I told you, right? So person aunties, she could have given all these books for these children to use, to look at and enjoy, and even they can draw sketches of it, right? So all these things were kept sealed from the youthful eyes, right? So some items are there. This is the picture A with that candlestick in the shape of a snake. Second one, picture B is that teapot, china duck, in the shape of a china duck. Is it attractive? Even we feel that it is really a beautiful item, right? But all these things were in the lumber room. Think of Auntie's imaginative power, how unimaginative she is. She doesn't understand that they are beautiful and they are very artistic, right? But for Nicholas, the small boy, all these things were pleasure giving items, right? By looking at these things, he enjoyed a lot. Picture C shows you those brass items. One was a goblet and the other one was a peacock, and the other picture is of course to indicate some birds that he could see, he could have seen in that book, not the exact ones like all these birds in the picture book, but to give you an idea, we have included all these pictures, right? So I think by looking at all these pictures, we can see what a beautiful world that Nicholas might have had in that lumber room, and his happiness, and why he was telling that it was a very different place, right? Next important incident in the story, while he was looking at all these pictures in that book, he heard the sound of aunt calling him, right? So she had fallen into that rainwater tank and she was asking for Nicholas's help. Aunt calling Nicholas's help when she fell into the rainwater tank is again very important, because there we find how witty Nicholas was to bring out some other ideas in his mind, right? So how Nicholas take the opportunity to attack the aunt verbally with his wit. He knew that aunt is not a very pleasant, very cheerful lady who is very sensitive and very kind. So when he also got an opportunity, what he did was he took the maximum advantage of it, opportunity of it, and giving auntie a very good verbal attack to show her some other negative qualities, right? So he says that when auntie calls him for help, I was not told to go into the gooseberry garden. And your voice doesn't sound like aunt's. Those are some comments he made when he heard the sound of aunt calling him for help, right? So see how intelligent these questions are. I was not, these are statements, are not questions actually. I was not told to get into the gooseberry garden. That was the aunt's rule. That was the aunt's punishment for me, right? Your voice also different. Your voice is not the aunt's one. So he is taking this conversation towards a different direction, we feel, right? So then after that, what happened? You may be the evil one. Now Nicholas is telling all these things to his aunt, right? But actually, he knows that he is talking with aunt. He pretends, he shows off that he is talking to somebody else, and that is not a very pleasant person, an evil one who will tempt him, forces him to do some kind of wrong things. That is why evil one is there, right? Aunt often tells me that evil one tempts me and I yield. So when small children become naughty, usually adults comment that, oh, somebody is there in your mind that tempts you to do these wrong things, right? So that is why you have become so naughty. So all these ideas are coming up with. So then he says that aunt always tells me that there is somebody, some evil one tempting me to do wrong things, and always I listen to him and I do wrong things. So this time I am not going to yield. It was a strong determination, right? Again he raises a very intelligent question, very tactful at the same time, right? Will there be strawberry jam for tea? It was another question he raised. For this, aunt says yes, right? I will talk about that later. But hearing this response, or after he heard this response from aunt or the answer from aunt, he says, then definitely you are not my aunt, you are an evil one. The reason he gives out is, now when he questioned whether there will be strawberry jam, for tea, the evil one, his imagined evil one, actually aunt speaking, says yes. So then he says, when I checked, when I looked, I knew there were 4 jars of jam in the store cupboard. But aunt says, no, there is no jam. So because you say there is jam, definitely you are not aunt. If you are aunt, you should say no strawberry jam for tea. So I don't believe you. You are an evil one and I don't come to help you. That was the idea. But actually think of this situation where very tactfully how this boy handles the situation and shows that he knows that there is strawberry jam at home and there are 4 jars of it, but aunt says no. So it shows again her hypocrisy and that insensitivity to the ideas of or the emotions of these children. These small ones are being lied by this lady, right? So she says no, no jam, but she is a liar. Definitely Nicholas knows there's jam because he saw them in the cupboard, right? So it shows aunt is a liar as well. Being an adult, they are caretaker. So aunt is telling lies. So Nicholas, no wonder, loses his trust about this aunt. How can these children believe or trust the words of adults? Or aunt represents the world of adults, and so in general we can say children could not believe or trust their elderly ones or the adults. So it is a very pathetic situation because it teaches the elders a good lesson. When we handle children, we have to be very careful, right? So we should be the role model, right? So aunt is not so. Aunt is lying. So can another day auntie just blame Nicholas for lying because she has done the wrong thing. So how can she say that you can't lie, you are lying, because she has taught the children to lie. She doesn't set an example to themselves. Knowing, she knows that there's jam. Boy also knows because he checked that in the cupboard and he saw. So Nicholas confirmed that aunt is telling lies, saying that no jam, but he indirectly hinted his aunt that he knows everything. But he didn't directly express that, but he imagined that he speaks to an evil one in the rainwater tank, and he wanted to show that aunt is not a very honest person, right? Aunt's dishonesty was shown there. Children could have a kind of victory or triumph over adults' world. Actually, this adventure to his lumber room was a very good story to show that, right? Children are believing in the words of adults, and when adults commit some wrong things, children lose their faith or trust in them. And then after that, it finds very difficult to handle these children. So punishments should be done very carefully. At the same time, handling children also something that we have to be very careful, right? Let's see what's there. It proves that Nicholas is very witty, wise, matured, bold, tactful, right? The way he keeps the book back before he leaves the lumber room is another example to show his tactfulness. Because we discussed so many other events, but this is also something we have to pay attention to, because now before he leaves the room, soon after hearing aunt calls him, what he did was to show that the book was not opened by or handled by anybody. He just took some dust from the nearby heap of papers and put onto that black cover and kept it in the same place. Now think of you. If you got panic, suddenly heard aunts calling you, or mother calls you when you entered into a place where mother prohibited you or not allowed you to enter. So you will get panic and you will jump out. But this boy was not so. He was taking time. Quickly he kept the book in the proper place and showed somebody also that it was not handled by anybody. So it shows he was tactful. His aunt was embarrassed really with this witty exchange of ideas, right? So as Nicholas doesn't come to help her one thing, and she becomes a prisoner in the water tank until the kitchen maid comes and helps her, right? So, Nicholas could keep aunt also in that rainwater tank for some time as a prisoner. That is also important because aunt wanted him to be as a prisoner, like not entering into the gooseberry garden, and Nicholas also could keep aunt in the same way. It shows that action and reaction, right? So, every action has a reaction. Same thing happened to her as well. Fine. Then let us move on. Aunt is a failure, as Nicholas had his dream of entering the lumber room and doesn't offer to help her to get out of the rainwater tank. There she is a failure because she of course called Nicholas to be her helping hand, but he refused it. Then dishonest and unreliable. What happened? Dishonest and unreliable means that children are not going to trust her anymore. I told you not to, and now I tell you that you may. So, aunt is changing her words. So, she shows that she is not a person that children can rely on, trust, right? Then aunt is a hypocrite. She is an opportunist. She plays with the feelings of the children. Certainly, there will be, is the answer for that, will there be strawberry jam for tea? But she privately resolved that she is not going to give jam to Nicholas. Now, see how bad she was. She was hurting the children, and actually she was cheating them, right? So, we can take her as a very dishonest character, and she was punished for her own folly. That is what I was telling you, right? Action and reaction, and she was in the water tank just because she had her own mistakes. Other children returned home without having any enjoyment as they was tied. So, that is also a good punishment for aunt because she wanted to arrange a trip to punish this boy and to make other children happy, and this boy of course unhappy. Was Nicholas actually unhappy? He entered into a different world and he had a kind of beautiful experience and a pleasurable few moments in that lumber room. He was not punished at all. Aunt got the punishment, right? What are the two examples? One is that children came back without having any enjoyment because they was tied and they couldn't enjoy, as aunt thought, that racing on the sand, beautiful sand and everything. The second point is that she had to be there in the rainwater tank as a prisoner for some time. So, aunt was also punished. Act of haste and impulsiveness is another feature or idea that we can take. Arranging a sudden trip to punish Nicholas without concern about the weather and time. So, she is impulsive, just giving way to her feelings and ideas and without thinking of future results, right. Far behind Nicholas's intelligence and maturity to his age. We understood that Nicholas is very intelligent and far better than her aunt's intelligence. Then we can understand a summary like, auntie is a narrow-minded, authoritarian, unimagined person, and she is lack of artistic taste. She is rude and wicked. She is unthoughtful, less considerate, very impulsive, and she is an opportunist. I gave you all the examples in the story to describe these features or the characteristics of the aunt's life. Then Nicholas again we can find as a very wise, intelligent, creative boy with highly and he is having a very rich imagination or his highly imaginative power, and he is very mischievous, very tactful, witty, honest, mature to his age, bold and brave, and very observant. He was very observant, right. So, he was watching everything very carefully, especially when he was having this conversation with aunt at the rainwater tank. It was very important how he was observant and how he had studied the way that aunt behaves. Themes in the story. The difference between the world of children and the world of adults. Adults are very narrow and authoritarian, whereas children have a very open and very free mind, right. The mind of a child, very imaginative, very creative, inquisitive, seeking to understand what is around him. That is why he wanted to go and observe or go and see what was there in that lumber room, prohibited place, right? Sealed from the youthful eyes. And gain kind of experience while growing and learning, and triumph or victory of the children over the adults. We knew that. Action and reaction I was talking about. Then there he felt very happy and a kind of like a victory, because he also could punish aunt for even for few minutes. That was not done with malice, but he wanted to show it as a kind of reaction for this aunt's behavior, right? Then resourcefulness in both of them, of course, sometimes, and especially Nicholas's character, and making the use of the opportunity. Especially we see that resourcefulness of Nicholas there, how he got entered into the lumber room, thinking that aunt is very much concerned that he will enter into the gooseberry garden, and again how he was having this conversation when aunt was in the rainwater tank, taking that opportunity to reveal that aunt is a liar, right. Then I am going to talk about the techniques. Short story form is here, and there is kind of comic and sarcasm, because certain incidents like when he was talking with aunt, we find some kind of like humor in certain answers, and aunt even falling in that water tank and asking for help. We may have a kind of humor in that with their conversation. She is a woman of few ideas with immense powers of concentration, is an idea given to show her kind of sarcasm or to look at her weakness, right. So, when we find humor in the story to a greater extent, and especially when we see that aunt is a failure in her haste, and conversation between aunt and Nicholas at the incident of rainwater tank, of course, we find some interesting lines to bring humor into the reader's mind, right. Then next, there are 3 questions that I have put on the slide. How does the character of aunt helps to bring out Nicholas's character? Write with examples from the text lumber room. This is an essay type question. I think with all these ideas we discussed and I put forward in my discussion, you may have got an idea, right, how to write an answer. You have to organize your answer very well. Aunt's character to talk about Nicholas, because aunt's weaknesses and her authoritative behavior and her authority and her unimaginative way of punishing him, everything helped us to understand the power, the capacity of Nicholas, his intelligence, creativity, his power of imagination, everything was there in abundance because aunt behaved in such a way. If aunt was not there, it would have been a different thing, right? So, we can just quote lines and get enough of examples to show that without aunt's character, we can't talk about some positive features of this Nicholas. Of course, Nicholas doesn't have any negative quality as I see, because his reaction was also in that rainwater tank, a kind of attitude to show that adults are not always right in their expressions, right. And while admiring the creative and picturesque world of children, the writer attacks the adult's world in the short story, The Lumber Room. I think the latter part of my discussion was a very good example for this answer, because I told you about the action and reaction. So, how this writer attacks the world of adults, and to remind them how the children should be punished and how careful we should be in our behavior as adults. Otherwise, we are going to be some jokers or some kind of comic characters in front of children, right. We are going to be another clown. As long as we are not going to be example in front of children as adults, the children are not going to trust us and believe us. So, that trust and confidence in adults is very important for the upbringing of children. Then last question, what can be the reasons for Nicholas to outsmart the aunt in the lumber room? I was telling this over and over again. He didn't have any malice or any grudge or hatred towards aunt, but he wanted to show very tactfully that adults' world is different from children, and adults should be thoughtful about the emotions and the happiness of children as well, without putting the law of adults always into action, right? So, dear children, I think I have discussed this short story, The Lumber Room by Saki, to a greater extent, and you might have got a very good clear idea of two main characters, Nicholas and Aunt, and how we are going to get questions based on these two characters, and to talk about different other themes, right. So, I am going to wind up my lesson at this and hope to meet you again with another interesting lesson like this. Goodbye, stay safe.